Pode ser ou não? Ok, boa tarde. Sem... Podemos começar? Ok. Ah, italiana, bem. Está a entrar pessoas. Então, estamos à vossa espera. As mulheres faltam. Estavam sem mulheres. Falei? Ah, ok. Obrigado. Boa tarde. Ok, então podemos começar isso? Está muito barulho lá fora, não é? Ok. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here and bring help into the COP28 and bring the need to bring the fire and to bring the content of the fire and the opportunity to bring the good fire into the COP28. This session is co-organized with FAO, with whom we have been working closely in the last 5 to 6 years. And we want to discuss and to bring to this event the experience that Portugal encompassed in the last 6 years in managing fires towards managing and governing the fire risk. It's different. I think we do believe that we do have the technology, but we are missing the institutional capability to put the ideas and to assure cohesiveness in the future, to have the future of the forest and future of the fire being well managed in order to assure that the trees are not smoked out by fire and the forest and the trees can be a tool to address the climate change. Well, the presentation we have here is mostly about how the problem is framed, what is the contribution at the international scale of the Portuguese efforts in the last 6 years and how it has evolved to the landscape fire governance framework, and then how does FAO will harness this governance development under the Global Fire Management Hub. And later on, the map biome fire from Brazil and Alencar will show how critical is monitoring to tackle and to keep the tools in place. Okay, according to the European Academy of Science, forest and reforestation and reverse deforestation and also increasing soil carbon levels are the most cost-effective deployable technologies to carbon dioxide removal. So having this in mind, I think we need to understand it's not enough to plant trees and to assure that the forests are growing, because we do know that the occurrence of wildfire is growing and the climate change exacerbates wildfire risk. Warmer temperatures, drier fuel loads, increase the probability of large-scale events. But also it's important to have in mind that 1% a year, the logged areas, it's burned. So we do have a growing problem in the plantation or natural areas that are logged in forestry, because those trees are also getting burned. So this means that if we plant trees, they probably will face a fire event in 100 years. So 1% of a year, it means that in risk analysis. We also important to recognize that the limits of suppression exist. You cannot throw airplanes or put more money in suppression resources expecting an outcome, a good outcome. There are limits for suppression effectiveness. And in the left chart, you can see all these big fire events we had in Europe in the last 10 years. All of them are below of the suppression capability. Airplanes, they do help in the early minutes, but it's not the solution. We cannot solve an economical and sociological problem as fires with technological fixes. So what we need is to bring more fire into the landscape, more silviculture, and more grazing. It's, I do understand that it's not easy to sell this idea because it's not cognitive, well recognized by the public opinion. If you are struggling with fire, why are you bringing more fire into the problem? But the fire, as the grazers, or the goats, or the sheep, or the cows, are the solution to it's ahead of the fire, the fuel that will burn in extreme fire events. So we need to assure that landscapes are managed with more fire during the winter time, more silviculture, and more grazing. Well, and having all these ideas in mind, and considering that in the Portuguese experience a big event in 2017, followed by early attempts in the 80s and the 90s on solving the problem with suppression resources, we found out that it's mostly the forest is privately owned, 97%. We do have the technology, but what we are missing is the capability to assure a long-term institutional capacitation to tackle the problem on the long run. Because, as I told you, 90% of the forest is private. The institution's capabilities take time to grasp and to take the lead on adopting the available knowledge. And we do have these early events where 16% of the days we may face critical fire events. But from the positive side, it means that 84% of the days we don't have fire threatening us. So we can do something during the winter time, managing fire, putting more fire on the landscape, and ensuring that we have an extensive grazing program in place. And also we are managing the urban inter-fire mix. Well, since 2017, we need to stop the bleeding and fix the bottlenecks in the Portuguese environment. So the politicians were asking for quick solutions to protect people, to assure evacuation, for example, was one of the solutions. We need to reduce the ignitions. We had 20,000 fires per season, and we need to reduce the probability of a large event. So we need to reduce the probability of those fires to start. We need to manage fuel in high risky areas, or we reinforce our pre-deploy resources. Our knowledge in operation decision were key to assure that resources were being managed in the right time and the right position. And at the same time, we need to develop a national cohesive rural fire strategy to assure that the process were in place and the process were being started and were being concluded with the people doing the tasks that were needed to be done. Well, in the last 6 years, we multiply by 10 the amount of money that Portuguese were spending in prevention. We were spending in 2017 2080 millions, and now we are spending 324 million euros a year. And of course, the suppression budget also increased, but only twofold. But I think, I don't know, FAO will probably have these figures, but according to an OECD report that was released this year, Portugal is ranking of the first of the countries that changed the paradigm. We are spending more money in prevention than we are spending on suppression. And this is the good news, but I don't know if we can sustain this level of investment. I hope we do, because as the memory fades, also the politicians tend not to spend all the money in prevention, and the suppression, quick fixes will be again on the table. But as I told you, what we are facing is not a fire management, a technical dilemma. It's about assuring that institutions' capabilities are in place to tackle the complexity and uncertainty. And that's why we are moving from managing a risk towards governing a risk. But those figures are really are quick wins, I would say. We had 0 fatalities in the last 6 years, civilians, and this was 2023 was the first year we didn't lost a person, operational, or a farmer to a fire. We cut by half the number of wildland fires, including on those days of severe fire weather, and we cut by 1/3 the historical burnt area. So now it's economically feasible to invest in forestry in Portugal. And those numbers inspire us in order to avoid a disaster ahead. But we need to keep spending and to assure that money is going to the ground, to the owners of the land, for them to reinvest their money in the fuel treatments. Otherwise, we are doomed to failure because we are just postponing a tragedy, because we are not reducing the fuel load in the forests. So there are some key messages that we address to take urgent action, assuring political commitment on pluriannual and sustainable financial availability, assure that we have economic and fiscal incentives to assure that private landowners are mobilized towards sustainable management. Again, long-term raise awareness among youngest, and assure that the key decisions are taken by qualified personnel, and also to assure that the polycentric governance scheme that we have developed, we have a national plan with 97 projects, it's unfold to regional and sub-regional regions. And of course, we need to multiply by 3 the area that is treated annually. But I think it's puzzled all the society, and I think from the Portuguese experience, what we are trying to deliver to FAO, to other countries that probably will face this problem in the future, it's that the big issues are about the institutionals, are about strategic, political, and managerial. We need to keep direction under complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. I think this is a key issue regarding a wicked problem we are facing. We need to have institutional trust and political culture, and also the governance and political bodies need to cooperate each other. Politically speaking, departments' goals and budgeting need to be coordinated, and the silos hierarchical approach need to be transversal. So we, as a super-ministerial entity, we do face difficulties sometimes in ensuring that each department has their goals aligned with the common goal of the country, because, you know, there are this silos culture, and each entity tries to keep the budget from himself. It's a issue on a political science, well described, but at the political level, we need to have all these departments come together to the common goal. Fiscal, energy, agriculture, and environmental policies cohesiveness is critical, and we do see here at Dubai at COP28, people are struggling with their own agendas because they have owned their problems, but the common future is ahead of us, and we need to assure that some compromise being achieved, of course, in managing fires concerning fiscal, energy, agriculture, and environmental incentives are aligned, and of course leadership. Without it will be very difficult to assure the long run. And on the managerial side, we need to assure there are resources and engagement of communities of people, and the monitoring is accountable, and the results are being communicated to the society as a whole. So those are the big ideas that came out from the Portuguese process, and because we were the lucky enough to organize the 8th International Wildland Fire Conference in Portugal, we came out with this framework idea in order to share our experience to other countries that in future may face a fire problem, and a kind of road book or a good guidance protocol should be in place when they are going to be hammered by a big fire event. And those are the ideas that I want to share with you in this first intervention. I send the word and floor to my colleague, João Verde, to present the landscape fire work. Thank you.
No, very good day to everybody. My name is João Carlos Verde. I'm head of policy at the Integrated Rural Fire Management, the agency in Portugal. But first and foremost, before giving you a few words about the framework, I invite you to a very quick video on it.
Landscape Fire Governance Framework. In the past 8th International Wildland Fire Conference held in than international framework. And we believe that you are a piece of the puzzle.
It's a pity I don't have the same voice like the narrator of the previous video. Such a good voice. Anyway, if we come to understand, governance, simplifying as the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or a community, we have to ask ourselves what kind of decisions are we trying to make and enforce. And in many countries, one of the decisions that are somehow being taken has to do with zero-fire policies. And we understand and we have seen that zero-fire policies do not work and they will never work. So we have to live with fire. And we have to understand that under the challenges that we have, if we keep doing exactly the same things that we have been doing for the past several years, and if we don't get better results, we are bound to have to do things differently. So we do know that there is a context of uncertainty. Things are not exactly the same as we used to plan before. There are a lot of stakeholders involved. We work with them, are truly aware of the decisions they have to make, and so that we can also respond to the challenges that the current situation on climate has been posing us. So as Tiago has already mentioned, it is actually a wicked problem that we have with landscape fires. They are actually not linear in solution. We do know also that there is a pressure put on institutions to have a semblance of certainty. People are not dealing quite well with the risk that the landscape fires pose, and some of the things are changing. If we keep in mind the challenges and the goals that we have set on climate issues, some of the models that we have been using are no longer giving the same results like before. And Not only that, we have observed that interests of several interested parties are somewhat competing. So we have, again, and I cannot stress this enough, we have again to work closely with everyone so that those interests are shared and follow the same path. Moreover, we have to bring communities to the decisions because they are usually not sufficiently close or empowered to participate in the decision-making process. So we know that old solutions no longer work. And this, I would say, is particularly important if we come to think of countries that are now starting to face issues with wildfires. Because in those that have already been battling wildfires for many, many years, they have come to, most likely, to the conclusion that old solutions are not working, but those who are new to the problem don't have to follow the same path like the ones that have failed somehow before. So there's an output we can give and there are lessons that we can share. That's why an international framework makes sense. We picked on voluntary guidelines that already existed from FAO, and we just, if you will, we revamped them a little bit. So this framework makes all the sense because it has principles that people can follow and adapt to their own landscapes. It's an idea that has to be boosted on international cooperation. People have to work closer together, and all of this is contained in this framework. So it begs the question, the framework has all that, perfect, but who is it intended for? The easiest and the quickest answer is to say it's for everybody, and it actually is. We cannot leave individual citizens outside of this. And we have to foster dialogue and close gaps. Tiago already mentioned there's a silo problem, there's a silo mentality. It exists everywhere, domestically but also internationally. Institutions don't always share information the way they could. They don't always make decisions together. So we have to take those silos down and actually bringing and trying to manage fire if the impacts don't go after what the people need, because they are on the land, they live off the land. So we have to have a very close dialogue with people. We should think about some sort of unified financing streams rather than atomized budgets, because that doesn't help. We need to know where priorities are and finance them accordingly. A good training and qualification program is needed. We have to make sure that we have, and we should ask ourselves, are we having the best people around doing the things they are the best in? Perhaps this answer is variable among the various countries where this question could be asked. So training and qualification should be worked upon. Certainly a good lessons learned program. Nothing is entirely successful all the time, so we have to have a lessons learned, a serious, a honest lessons learned process. And we truly believe that high-level governance bodies do help, and they do help breaking the silos that I was speaking about earlier. So if I wanted to think on the framework guidelines and resume them in a nutshell, this would probably be the illustration to resume it. And we have to know where the risk is. I cannot make good decisions and I cannot act upon the risk if I don't know where it is. I have to assess it. I truly need to know how different communities are willing to accept the risk. Tolerance towards risk is different depending on where I am. I'd say some Western, I would dare say some Western societies will tolerate far less risk than some other communities. And we have to assess that as well and see what communities are willing to lose and what must be defended at all costs. that will allow for informed decisions on all steps of the value chain I spoke earlier. We have to monitor and change when needed. We have to ask local people how things are working, how our initiatives are impacting them, if they are having success or unsuccess carrying out the actions that have been proposed. And we cannot plan for 10, 15 or longer time spans and never revise that planning. We have to go back and see if the impacts are the ones we expected and change accordingly. We have to fund as necessary. That's also part of keeping it flexible. And we have to keep everybody informed, not only the system that has to respond, to prepare, or to plan. We have to take care of the people as well. And that's giving them good information on how to tackle the risk they are exposed to. So these are some of the guidelines that the framework has. And you might ask, okay, how can I move forward? I can read the document, and you can. It's online in English, in French, and Portuguese at the moment, momentarily in Spanish as well. But what can I do? Well, you can adopt it. You can work with your own communities, with your own governments, either national or local, and try to have some of the policies that are proposed, or ideally all of the policies that are proposed in your own national and local policies, influencing your budgets as well. Perhaps there are documents, directives, regulations that you can work on that help implement the ideas that the framework contains. If you don't have a landscape fire governing body, you might consider having one or asking for one. It's about breaking silos again and fostering dialogue, so it might be useful for you to have a high-level governing body, not forgetting other frameworks that exist and that have very tight connections with the matter of wildland fires. And most certainly you could work on having a very good training and qualification program, because you will need it, especially if you are now starting to deal with wildfires. If it's new to you, you will need the best people you have working on it and making fewer mistakes and making sure that you have the best, the most prepared people working on all steps of the wildfire value chain. And last, you have to keep in mind that if you don't attribute value to your rural areas, you will not manage them actively. People don't care about the things they don't attribute value to. So there has to be value on the land. People have to feel they derive some sort of value from that. That will make them manage the land more actively. They will change behaviors for sure. And that leads ultimately to a more efficient risk management. You will find out that if you do this, you will have a reduction, a very serious reduction, I believe, on those bad fires, and planned and controlled. You will be reducing carbon emissions, and will, of course, be increasing carbon sequestration. That's quite important, being that we are at COP right now. So think about strengthening the governance model in your countries and communities. Again, think about a very good training and qualification program. These are actions that I believe everybody can take. And with this, having given a very quick overview on the framework, which I invite you to read thoroughly, I'm quite happy to give the floor to Amy Duchel from FAO, team leader on forests and climate. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, João, and thank you, Thiago, for organizing this event. And it was nice for me now to actually learn more about the Landscape Fire Governance Framework. So I'm Amy Duchel, a senior forestry officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and leading the forest and climate work. And basically, FAO is one of the leading technical agencies for forestry issues within the UN system, including on fire issues. And recently, during the conference that Tiago and João mentioned, in Portugal, we also launched the Global Fire Management Hub with UNEP and other partners. And this hub is really, the aim of it is to enhance countries' capacities on integrated fire management. And again, I mean, I think the previous two speakers outlined this very well. It's a paradigm shift from a focus on suppression to a much more holistic approach and looking at physical, biological, ecological, social, political, and technical aspects of fire. I mean, I read recently it's something like 90% of financial resources go into suppression. And think about that. I mean, that's actually probably, you could reduce those costs considerably if you're dealing with fires before, wildfires, devastating fires before they start. So it's this idea again of thinking about, integrated fire management that combines fire culture, fire ecology, and fire management in a much more holistic way. So FAO comes at this from what we call the 5 R's to fire management, and that's been enshrined. I mean, that actually, we wrote these voluntary fire guidelines in 2006, and these 5 R's came up later. And so in fact, we're in the process of revising the fire guidelines, and I think we could align quite a bit, in fact, with the landscape fire governance framework in doing that. But it's really based on a review and analysis, so really understanding the fire issue in the countries that we support. Risk reduction, so focusing on the underlying causes to make wildfire and damage less likely. Readiness, so preparedness to fight fires. And we've just launched a project in Southeast Asia that's focused on those three R's that are really dealing with fires before they even start. But then, of course, there is the 4th R, which is on response. And I mean, yes, there are going to be unwanted fires forever. I mean, we're in a new climate reality and in a new era, and this is just going to increase. And so there is a role, of course, for suppression. It's just that we can shift the emphasis, shift the finance, shift the attention to the earlier R's. And then the recovery post-fire, focusing on community welfare and repairing infrastructure and restoration of landscapes. And FAO and UNEP together co-lead the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which will go until 2030. And there's a piece of that focuses on post-fire recovery and restoration as well. So already, as I said, the aim is to strengthen countries' capacities. I mean, we're a UN agency, so the point is to serve our members and to support the members who are dealing with this issue and help them better implement integrated fire management. And there are many partners who are already coming on board in terms of international partners. Of course, this was launched with UNEP, but several, I mean, João and Tiago mentioned the Sendai framework, and so the UNDRR is a big part of this as well. Also the WMO, and now actually we're reaching out to the World Health Organization as well because of this issue of smoke and smoke pollution and the effects on health. I want to recognize the Global Fire Monitoring Center, which is based in Germany, and they have 14 regional networks, and Johann Goldhammer is the lead of that, the head of that center, and he has recently said that he will integrate the 25-year experience, capacities, and networks into the Fire Hub. And so this is, I mean, it's a great way for us to start because we're building on decades of work, and I think as several of you said, there's so much on fire going on. I mean, the idea of this is not to reinvent anything. In fact, it's just to fill a gap that was being asked for a UN mechanism to help deal with this issue in a more, coherent way. And then I should also mention, of course, the regional, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission and the Global Wildfire Information System, regional FAO networks that work on fire, and then of course indigenous networks and other national and local initiatives that we'll hear about after this from Brazil. So there's 5 initial pillars, and here they are, focused on knowledge sharing, capacity building, wildfire resilient communities. My colleague Lada Steil, she is the fire management officer at FAO, and she led Brazil's Preve Fogo program before coming to FAO. And there was a huge focus, in fact, on indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, the good fire, the necessary fire that's absolutely linked to food security. And so ensuring that this community know-how and need and understanding is really its own pillar, in fact, because it's that important. And if fire's managed in the wrong way, you actually could really, negatively affect communities who depend on fire for their livelihoods. Fire risk assessment and early warning, working with partners, especially who are focused on that. FAO has a lot of national forest monitoring capacity, but there are many working on this that we're joining with, including the Early Warning for All initiative that was launched last year by the UN Secretary General, and they've asked FAO, FAO is a partner, but they've asked us to come in more actively now in this for the early warning systems. And then finally, policy support, and I would say financial support as well, that's linked to that, and how to get fire elements into nationally determined contributions, into national adaptation planning, which is currently quite underrepresented. So again, the landscape fire management framework, which we just heard about in a lot of detail, the idea that we're having now, and this is a work in progress, including through discussion with you all, but the hub could serve as a mechanism to implement and monitor the framework's goals and outcomes. The hub will become operational through the creation of a small secretariat and hiring of regional officers. We're starting that now. The first phase of the hub will be hosted at FAO, and then we will have regional fire officers in probably Latin America, Southern Africa, and Southeast Asia to start. And it will be implemented at scale through global, regional, and country projects. But I think as Joao said very nicely, the guiding principles of the framework, really, they came from a process that happened several decades ago. And so I think we can use those guiding principles as we implement these different activities within the hub and make that somehow very clear. I just will quickly, this is the Affirm project that I mentioned that's happening in Laos, PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. And it's one of the first projects in country that's feeding into the hub's activities. And focused again a lot on risk reduction, integrated risk management, and also readiness. So the roadmap for the hub from this year till next year, we had our first workshop in November where we were focused on integrating the Global Fire Monitoring Center, that German center that I was mentioning, and its related networks and partners into the Fire Hub. And we had a really great participation, including from several member countries of FAO and partners. The second workshop will likely be in March of next year, and that's really bringing in the Global Wildland Fire Network and its associated regional networks and centers, so that will have much more of a regional flavor. The first workshop was really quite a global, sort of launching in a way of how we're going to move this, and this will really bring in the distinct regions, their needs, their progress, and try to connect the hub activities to that. And then the third workshop will actually start to bring in the countries, FAO member countries, especially the key countries who have shown support for the hub, either because of early pledges of financial resources, but also countries, like Ecuador, who has a wonderful fire management capacity and experience, and they're very interested in bringing that into the hub. We were talking to Indonesia as well. They have a very unique and distinct context. They would like to bring their know-how into the hub. And so starting to work with the countries who voluntarily are coming forward and wanting to contribute. And then that will feed into FAO's Committee on Forestry, which is held in July of next year. So that's it from my side. Thank you. And then, as I guess I then turn it over to Annie Alencar. Dr. Annie Alencar, she is the Director of Science at IPAM in Brazil, and we'll talk about mapiomas.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Thiago, and thank you for the invitation. So I will bring an example from Brazil but from a point of view of how to create networks to actually produce data, fire data locally. So it's a way to engage local people in the fire issue. So I'm bringing the example of Mapbiomas. Mapbiomas is a network of institutions that we are now in 14 countries, and we work by mapping land use, land cover change, and also disturbances. And we do this by engaging local institutions, small institutions, NGOs, universities, enterprises in this type of mapping. And also this is a support to some of the governments, where in some of these countries they even don't have any type of data. So the idea behind Mapbiomas is to build local capacity in each tropical country to generate land use and land cover data set based on remote sensing, and making those used by decision makers to foster sustainable management of natural resources and climate mitigation. So the main model that Mapbiomas use, which I think is very different, we have multidisciplinary, multi-capable, multi-territorial, multi-institutional collaborative organizations working together. We learn by doing. We produce time series of annual maps. We are very transparent on this, what we do. We publish everything that we do before, even like doing scientific publications. So in our days, we have more than 1,000, how many, Julia, publications in scientific peer reviews? 2,000. And we in Mapbiomas only have 8 years old. So it's amazing. And from the group is only, I don't know, 30 to 40 publications. So it's an open science in a way. But talking about Mapbiomas Fire and what we provide that is unique, in Brazil, we provide an annual data set on a burned area. And when we started Mapbiomas, that was the only data set on high resolution burned area, which is very key for taking decisions. From this, we also, the way we do it, we retrieve monthly burned area. So we are not talking about fire hot pixels, which are very good and important. We are talking about burned area. We know cumulative burned area, fire frequency, all elements that are very important to take decision in fire management. So in our days, we have two products. One is the annual data set, so it's updated every year, which is Mapbiomas Collection 2, based on Landsat. And we have the Fire Monitor, which is a higher resolution data set based on Sentinel-2. And we launch every month for every the 10th day. For example, we will be launch the data from November, like next week. So, and the way we do it, we use deep learning, artificial intelligence way of mapping, because we do have to deal with a very large data set, and we have to take advantage of each observation, because I don't know if there is any remote sensor here, but if you miss an observation window in a savanna place, for example, you may lose the fire scar. So you need to take the opportunity to get as much as observations possible. And this is just an example. We collect all the information available for a year, and we compile in just one image. So we reduce the remote sensing information to just one image, and you can have an idea of everything that was burned in that year. And here is just to bring all of this to this discussion, is how to deal with a country such as Brazil, which is a big country, which has different fire regimes in different ecosystems. So a little bit more than half of Brazil, we should have zero fire policy. And the other part of Brazil, we should have really a fire policy that allows people to burn when they need to burn. What I mean, the good fire. So how to deal with this complexity? In the Amazon, for example, which is about half of Brazil is the Amazon biome, we shouldn't have fires there. Forests, naturally speaking. So naturally speaking, the fire regime return interval should be between 200 and 1,000 years in the Amazon humid forest. And when you look at this map, in the past 38 years, the Amazon was the biome that burned more in Brazil. So those are all human ignited fires. And the worst thing is that those human ignited fires are becoming forest fires. So the forest that shouldn't burn now is burning. And once that forest is burned, at least for the next 10 years, that forest will keep emitting and can lose at least 50% of its carbon storage. So that is huge and is not accounted in the inventory because it's not deforestation. The forest is still there. But the quality of the forest is very bad. So really, and this is the point that I want to leave here, is how to take this message about integrated fire management when you have such a diversity of ecosystems that in one you really need to take care when and how to use fire. And the other, you need to use fire in the right time. And getting all the information from indigenous peoples that have been managing fire for years, centuries, not years, centuries. So I think this, taking this from Brazil to the world, this is what we have to face with the fire issue in a changing climate. Because the Amazon forest, the Amazon rain humid forest shouldn't burn. If we didn't have as much as land use change, fire ignition from cattle ranching, and climate change. So this type of data is very crucial because we know what is burning. And for example, we know which type of vegetation is burning. We know that in Brazil, around 68, almost 69% that burns in native vegetation, but 10% burns in forests. It shouldn't burn. We know that, for example, in the Amazon, if we take this graph for the Amazon, more than half of the area burned in the Amazon burns in cattle ranching. And those are the fires that ignite wildfires. So we need to have specific policies to deal with that. With this data, we can have the fire frequency, and we know which areas were burnt more than once, and those have implications to carbon emissions and also to the risk of that area to burn again. We know we can track the change in the time, in the season of the fire, which is a very important fire property. So, and finally, we have the fire monitor. Everything that I talked, all the information is open and transparent in the mapbiomas.org.br webpage. And now we are expanding this to the other countries of where Mapiomas has network. We gave a training for the Indonesia, so they are already preparing this data set. We will start with the other countries in South America. So we have a workshop early next year to do that. And everything is made to really engage and promote capacity building for local organizations. So they can step up and they can show the type of information that I'm showing you. And this has been very important, for example, for Previ Fogo, which is one of our partners, because they are using this information to really take decision and move forward integrated fire management actions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Yesterday we were in the Korean pavilion learning about the fire. Today morning in the Australian, and now in this afternoon in Portugal to speak about fire. Well, fire represents about between 5 to 20% of global CO2 emissions, depending on the year. I think 2023, due to Canada fires, will be representing a little bit further of the 33 billion tons of carbon emitted. 2 to 10% are from fires, and you can see from Amazonian forests there are a critical need to preserve the existing forest, but also to avoid the carbon emissions. And from the Portuguese experience, what we have showed here is that we can share also resources, because we sent some people to Canada, as Brazilians sent, in order to fight those fires this July. And through that international experience and cooperation, it's also one of the keys for the solution. And from this Portuguese experience, that we want to outreach to this community, bringing good fire to COP, I think we might hear a clue for what can be achieved globally if we do follow more closely this framework in order to govern fire instead of being governed by fire. I think it's quite important that from the Portuguese experience that we explain and showed how we can reduce the number of fires, how we can reduce the impact of our society and also in the biodiversity and afforestation areas. And this little example may open a light, I hope, in the other countries in order to inspire them to follow the framework. We are far away from presenting all these good results, only the successes, but we do also have some failures, and those need to be shared in order also for other countries to avoid the traps where we step in. Fortunately, very few, I hope. But this is a process going on. It's a political process, and I also like to thank you that the fire is the context, is the synthesis of the context. I think at this COP28 we could say that cooperation and dialogue it's the roots of the solution to bring less smoke in the atmosphere arising from those fires. Thank you for your presence, and be there remotely and be here presently, and good week ahead on negotiating the future ahead. Thank you.
Landscape fire. Landscape Fire Governance Framework. In the past 8th International Wildland Fire Conference held in Portugal in 2023, people were invited to discuss and participate in defining the governance principles of an international framework. And we believe that you are a piece of the puzzle. You matter because you can help your nation and all nations to be better prepared to build fire-resilient landscapes and societies. After all, a global problem can't be solved with one solution by one country or one person. Landscape fires will require a global commitment, shared resources and efforts. An international framework is key to better governance and to push forward towards better global solutions. These are the challenges faced by a wicked problem like landscape fires. Uncertainty, non-linear cause-effects relationships, multiple sectors, diversity of stakeholders, levels of connectivity. That's why we need to move from landscape fire management to landscape fire governance. The Landscape Fire Governance Framework brings guidelines and principles, a tool to develop integrated fire management to its full scale, a booster to institutional arrangements, and enables trust based on a set of principles that support the guidelines of a comprehensive governance model. International cooperation, adequate governance bodies, risk assessment, risk evaluation, risk management, stakeholder engagement, systemic and public communication. How can you move forward with the adoption of the framework and its translation into national policies, with the development of directives according to framework guidelines, with the creation of a dedicated landscape fire governing body that articulates with the Sendai Framework Platform, with training and qualification programs at international level towards certification and increased interoperability, international knowledge sharing, support and monitor the implementation of the framework guidelines and integrated fire management. Landscape Fire Governance Framework.